Hello and welcome! In this lecture we're going to take our unit and simply expand upon the logic in order to handle multiple units and select which one we want to use. Okay, so over here we have our game, currently just one unit and we're controlling it directly, so I can click anywhere, tell it where to move. Now adding support for multiple units is actually going to be quite easy. Because of how we wrote the code, all of the unit logic is going to remain the same. The only thing we need is to keep track of which one is a selected unit in order to make sure that we only apply actions to that one unit. And again, everything in the game is an action, so we want to know what is the selected unit and the selected action. So let's begin by creating a new C# script inside of our scripts folder. And for this one, we're going to want to manage the selected unit and selected action, so let's call it the unit action system. Now let's make a game object to run it, so create an empty game object, the unit action system, attach a script, and keep things nice and clean, reset the transform. Okay, now open it. So all we need to know is which one is the selected unit, so let's just make a field for it. So just a private unit for the selected unit. And we can also make it a serialized field, so we can set it in the editor by default. Over here in the editor, there we go, there's our field, so let's drag the only unit that we have so far, okay? And now, like I said, this system is the one that is actually going to control the units. So let's remove the input logic from the unit script. So over here on the unit script, we are doing this input logic. So let's remove it from here and place it on the unit action system. So let's do a private void update. Now on the unit script, let's just copy this and remove it from the unit script. And on the unit action system, just paste it. So when we have the mouse button down, the left mouse button, then we're going to want to tell the unit to move. So instead of just calling move, we go into the selected unit and we call move. All we need to change is make sure that this is public so that this can call. So just swap this out from private into public. Okay, so basically right now everything should still be working exactly the same as previously. Let's test. Make sure you drag the selected unit reference onto the field. Now here we are, and if I click somewhere, yep, there you go, the unit still moves. Alright, so everything still works exactly the same as previously. Next up, we want to duplicate our unit to manage multiple units. But before we do that, let's actually make it a prefab. And since this is the first one, let's first make a folder for it. So create a new folder, call this the prefabs. Let's grab our unit and just drag it onto the prefabs. There you go, we've got another one. So now in scene view, let's place another unit. So let's drag another prefab somewhere in there. Let's put it maybe on position, say 404. Okay, so we now have two units. And if we test like this, okay, we do have two units, but the second one automatically runs 400. So let's fix that issue, make the unit essentially stop where it started. That's pretty simple. Let's just go into the unit script. And over here, let's make a simple private void awake. And on awake, really all we need to do is set the target position to be this current transform.position. Okay, that's it. Let's test again. And yep, now the unit stays where it is. Okay, so far so good. Now let's think how we're actually going to select the units. The answer is actually going to be by doing exactly what we did for the mouse position, meaning we're going to fire a raycast. It's going to be fired on the mouse position, and we're going to see if we hit a unit collider, and if so, select a unit. So I want to be able to click on this one in order to select this unit, and then tell it to move, then click on that one to select that one, and tell it where to move. Okay, so on the unit, let's set a collider. However, do remember that now we're working with prefabs, so we need to make sure that all changes apply to all prefabs. So one way is over here on the selected prefab on the scene view, we can just add a box collider, and then we can go into the overrides and apply all of the overrides back into the prefab. Another way is we can double click on the prefab on the project window, and if we double click, we go inside and now we can add it. And yet another method is if we select the unit game object over here placed on the scene. On the inspector, we've got a button to click on open, and that opens the prefab whilst inside the scene. And now this works basically the same thing as double clicking on the prefab itself. So over here, let's add component and let's add a box collider. Okay, now let's just resize the collider to have a good size. By the way, quick Unity tip, you've got the edit collider button. So using this button is much easier than playing around with all of these values. So let's click on this and we see a bunch of squares, a bunch of handles that we can grab. So let's just use this to set the size of our collider, so a bit about that, and make it a bit thinner, so we need to make sure that we actually click on the unit. Okay, so like this looks like a pretty good collider. Now we do not want this collider to interfere with any physics, so let's make it a trigger collider. And the next thing is on the layer. Now for this one, there are many ways you can handle this. You could leave it on default and just do some logic to find the units, Or we can do like we did for the mouse raycast, so let's put all of the units on a separate layer and make the raycast simpler. So let's click on the layer drop-down menu, let's add a new layer, call this one the units layer. Then on the unit itself, let's swap the layer onto the units layer. Then it asks if we want to modify the layer for all child objects, and sure, we can do that. I mean, it doesn't really matter which layer the visual is on, but sure, let's keep everything on the units layer. Alright, so with this we have a collider on all of our units. Let's go back into scene view. So on the scene button, you've got over here telling you where we are. So we are inside the scene view and inside the unit prefab. So let's click on the scene view to go back outside, and it asks you if you want to save the prefab, and yep, that's what we want. Okay, so we've got both units, both of them have a collider, so this one also has a collider. Alright, now let's go back into the unit action system. And over here, let's keep our code nice and clean and make a proper function to handle unit selection. So let's make a private void, call it handle unit selection. Then on our update, we're simply going to call this, so call handle unit selection. Now this movement code that we have here, this one is just for testing. We're going to eventually remove this when we implement a proper move action, so that's why I'm not also refactoring this code into a function. Then on the handle unit selection script, over here we're going to do the same thing that we did on the mouse position script. If we look inside our mouse world class, we can see how we handled it. We did a camera screen point array to do a raycast on the mouse position, and then fire that raycast and get the info back into raycast hit. Okay, so with all of this, you should be able to complete this challenge. Go ahead and add the logic for selecting the unit under the mouse position. In order to do that, you're going to need to do three things. So first of all, you're going to need to test for the mouse click. Then you're going to do a raycast on that mouse position. And finally, get the unit component to see which unit was clicked. Like I said, it's very similar to the mouse position code, so go ahead, pause the video and give that a go. Alright, welcome back. So like I said, it's going to be similar to the mouse world, so let's just copy this. Let's go into our unit action system and paste it. We get the ray from the main camera using the input mouse position, okay. Then we do a raycast on that ray, we get the raycast hit, we use float max value for distance, all that we need is the layer mask for this one. So let's rename this one into the unit layer mask, and let's define it up here. So we've got the selected unit, and let's also add another serialized field, private layer mask, and call it the unit layer mask. Okay, so we have that one and we use down here. We do our raycast, and now in this case, the ray will either hit something or nothing. So we do need to test for this. So do an if on this raycast. So this will return true if it hits something and false if it doesn't hit anything. So if it is inside here, then we have hit on something. Then to get the unit component, we can go into the raycast hit. And inside it, we've got all kinds of things that we can access. So for example, we can access the transform, and then that transform, we can just use get component to get the unit component. So we just get that one of type unit, and there it is, we have our unit component. Now here, by the way, one quick tip, I'm guessing you're probably already familiar with get component. It's pretty simple, it's how you get the component for a game object. However, there's also another version of this function, and that one is called try get component. This one is similar, except instead of returning the component, it returns a boolean, true or false, depending whether the component was found or not. And then you can see the parameter is an out keyword. So if it does find a component, then it will set this unit. So let's make out unit, call it the unit. And then we can just put all of this inside an if. Okay, so if the game object that we clicked on, if that one does have a unit component, then we're going to have this field set. So with this, we can now do whatever we want with it. The benefit of using try get component is that you don't need to do a null check. So if you were to use the other one that I was saying, if you were to use just the get component, so just get component of type unit, you would do this, then store this inside that variable, and then you'd have to test if unit is not null. So both these are doing pretty much exactly the same thing. You can either get the component, then test if it isn't null to make sure that that game object does have that component, or you can use try get component, which personally I find that it makes a lot more sense. Okay, so we try to get the unit component. If it is true, then we have indeed clicked on a unit. And with this, to handle our unit selection, we just need to set our selected unit. So let's set the selected unit onto this unit. And actually, here's a note from me from the future. You might have noticed that the code here is trying to select the unit on every single update instead of only on mouse click, whereas what we want is to only handle unit selection on the mouse click. So the simple solution is just to put the handle unit selection inside the if. This issue is fixed in the next lecture. Okay, so just like this, it should already be working. All we need to do is make sure we assign the unit layer mask in the editor. So in the editor, select the unit action system, and on the unit layer mask, let's make sure we select the units layer. Again, layer masks allow you to select multiple, but make sure you only select the units layer. And also make sure that the unit itself, it is placed on the units layer. Okay, everything should be working. Let's test. Alright, here we are, and now this unit should be selected by default, so if I click, yep, it does move that one. Now if I click on top of the collider for that unit, yep, there you go, it does select that unit and then actually move that one. So now I can click somewhere, and now I'm moving that unit, click on that one, and now moving this unit. Alright, awesome. So this does work, but as you can see, we have an issue. If I click on that unit, it automatically selects it and then tells it to move to the mouse position. That is because in our code, we are handling the unit selection, and right after that, we are telling the selected unit where to move. But what we really want is just to do either one or the other. So we either want to select a unit or move a unit and not do both of them in the same frame. So one easy way to handle this is to make sure that this unit returns a boolean. And if we do select a unit, then let's return true. And if we don't select any unit, then return false. And also again, let's make sure we write good clean code. So for a function that tries to do something, for that I like to name it just like the try-get component here, meaning I like to add a try in the beginning. So in this case, let's rename this function. And by the way, the shortcut for renaming is F2. So selected, press F2, and let's rename this to try handling unit selection. And yep, it automatically updates all of the references. So we've got this function which tries to handle unit selection. If it does select something, returns true. If not, returns false. So over here, we can just do an if. So if this function returns true, that means we did select the unit. If so, then we don't want to handle all of this. So in order to stop this code from running, we can really just call return. Again, here's me from the future. This line should be inside the if. Again, later on, we're still going to refactor this code into a proper move action. But for now, this should be working, so let's test. So here we are, and I click to move, and yep, moves this one. Now I click on that one, and there you go, that one should be selected, but it did not move. Now I click, and yep, there you go. Now click on this one, select, click to move, and yep, it does work. Alright, awesome. So we have multiple units. We have 2 here, but we can have as many as we want, and we can just click to select and move them anywhere. Okay, so we already added a simple unit selection logic. Now let's just do one more small final thing. This script that we made here, the unit action system, this one is going to be very important for making the entire game. Unity has awake, start, and update functions on all monobehavior components. It basically makes sure that all of the awakes run before all of the starts, which run before all of the updates, and so on. However, there's also an internal order that decides which awake goes before which awake. Now, since this script is extremely crucial for the making of this game, we want to make sure that this script, the awake, start, update, and anything here, we want to make sure that this one runs before any other scripts. We want to ensure that instead of leaving that to chance. Basically, if you don't define a specific order, then Unity by itself will decide which script runs before which other one. However, we can set that specifically. So in the editor, let's go into Edit, then down here into Project Settings. And on the Project Settings on the left side, we've got this menu for the script execution order. And over here we can set a specific order rather than trying to guess what Unity will do. So we can either click on the plus icon and find our script, or we can also just drag it. So the unit action system, let's click and drag, and we want this one to run before all of the others. So let's click on these 2 dashes and we can set it anywhere, and let's place it before the default time. So with this, it ensures that the unit action system runs before any other scripts. This will help avoid any sort of timing collisions that we could have, since with this way we know for sure that this one is going to run before anything else. Okay, so that's it, just click on apply and it's done. And with that, here we have our fully functioning unit selection system. So we can place as many units as we want, we can click to select them, and we can tell them where to move. The only thing missing is we do not have any kind of visual for which unit is currently selected, so let's handle that in the next lecture.